Fernando Guzzi, welcome to this episode of Beyond a Reasonable Doubt, a podcast from David Horn. Welcome.
Thank you, Ivar. It is an honor to be here. I'm so glad that I can speak from my, and I hope I can share some of my experiences here in Brazil from a perspective of a police officer. Please, we can start.
Thank you so much. Before we go anywhere, if you could say a little bit more about who you are, your background and position, so that our listeners can get a little bit more known to you.
Okay. So I hold this position in the investigative police in Brazil, which works as a head of the units. So we call here like a police commissioner, but we have a lot of police commissioners. So not the police commissioner, but one police commissioner. And I've been working as this police commissioner for 9 years now in Brazil. Before the state police of Santa Catarina, I worked in the Paraná police state, which is another state here in the south of Brazil. And since my first day at the police, I was already interviewing and I was already investigating homicides and other crimes like that, organized crime related crimes, because that's how it works in our state police, in our police. So yeah, I have conducted maybe thousands of interviews and in every kind of crime that we have here in Brazil. And it is interesting. I would like to share that the first half of my career here in Brazil, I didn't know that investigative interviewing technique exists. I just used my guts. I went to my guts and my instinct, and it was in my mind. It was working because I got a lot of confessions. I solved the cases, and I started to become now of a good confession obtainer, something like this. So the director of my academy called me and, oh, I've heard you are a good interrogator, right? So join the police academy and teach the new officers how to interview. Actually, he was saying without saying, teach them how to obtain confessions. So, okay, let's do that. So I had to study for a test and apply for a test. And okay, I was able to teach at the police academy. So I became a instructor of, at time we called interrogation techniques. Now we call investigative interview. So I had to study. I wouldn't like to go there in front of 30 new police officers and just telling them, okay, so I will talk and talk and talk and talk and convince people to confess. So I started to study and I delved into scientific research about all of this. I met the cogjus, as we say here in Brazil, or cogius, as you say there. I met Lilian Stein, William Ciconello, and then I discovered the investigative interviewing universe. So studying and knowing all of this, I started to think, what was I doing? All that confessions, all that people telling me maybe what I wanted to hear, confirming my initial hypothesis of the cases. So I started to, in my mind, to review all those cases. Okay, probably they were guilty, but I couldn't be really sure. And I couldn't go back time. Okay. So I decided that no, from now, it was like the 4th year of my career, more or less. Before, I didn't have the responsibility because I didn't know I was doing something that was not the best thing to do, you know? But once I delved into this, so okay, now I cannot go back there. And from now, I will do the right thing. No, the right thing, maybe not the best way to put it, but I will do a professional work. you know? I don't want them to confirm my beliefs. I want to get information from the interviewees. That's why, and not any information, you know, reliable information, detailed, valuable, and auditable information. Uh, I want to be professional. I can tell from my perspective that for the last 5 years of my career, I've been doing this, and I can compare the old Fernando and this Fernando from the last 5 years. And I can testify that I feel so better with being this Fernando and trying to teach new police officers or even old police officers this technique and the advantages of it. And I can say that my work as a police investigator, police officer, and as a manager, a local manager, it's like a different job. It's not the same. Okay. I'm not getting so many confessions. Okay. But we are still solving the cases. We are having this best impression from the judicial system. And I can say that we cannot go back there. You understand? So this is some of my experience in general, and I'm still conducting interviews. I am able to compare with these old interviews. And yes, we cannot go back there because this way it really, really, really works.
Thank you for what a really interesting story, and I have to say it reminds me of my early days. You know, we're sharing the office with Asbjørn Reklev, who you have met several times. Together, we were fortunate enough also to be in the front of changing the policy and practice in our own country. I remember Asbjørn when he was like you, he was like the confession master. And if they had a case that they didn't have any evidence, but they had a suspect, they came to Asbjørn and asked, "Can you help us here?" And he was, you know, a former top athlete, so he wanted to win. So he used all means he could within the law, and sometimes stretching it, I guess, to get these what he thought about success for him personally, but also for us as an organization. And then I remember it was one case. It was a homicide case or attempted homicide case between two rivaling outlaw motorcycle gangs, Hells Angels and one group called Outlaws. And the main suspect, I was interviewing him, and we had a really good conversation. I did not think so much about confession. I never was that kind of guy. I was just thinking about interested in people, your story, and, you know, what is it that you say? Can I test it? Can I not test it? Actually, a little bit like we do it now, but I wasn't trained either. But Asbjørn and my style were very different. And then Asbjørn went to our boss and said, why are you letting Ivar sitting there with this guy? He get no results. So send me in and I will fix it. And our boss was, you know, yeah, maybe. So she had me for this conversation and said, sorry, we made a decision. Asbjørn will from now on interview this suspect. And Asbjørn didn't even tell me that he had spoken to her. And then, okay, I said, if you think you can do this, do it then. I have a very good relationship with him, respectful, and he talks. I don't know what more you want. And then Asbjørn went in the day after, and after 15 minutes, the suspect just banged his hand in the table and said, you are a fucking asshole. There will be no more interviews. I don't want to speak to you at all. And and that also tainted me, Fernando, because he thought that this was kind of a classical good guy, bad guy thing.
Sure.
So when I came back the day after and said, sorry, I didn't know this. I was not a part of this plan. He didn't believe me. So we had lost our trust.
Of course.
I think it's so interesting that even an outlaw motorcycle member, he wants to feel that he can trust the police.
Yeah. He's a person.
He had expectation to us, and the way I met him, I think he felt that these expectations were met, but then they fell down, and we could never actually restore it again. I think that is so interesting. And so you reminded me of this story. But what would you say then, Fernando, if we try to summarize, what is the difference? What is the kind of the ethos of investigative interviewing that wasn't there before? What is the difference?
Before, it was a different aim. Leaving the room, the interviewing room, thinking of the criminal investigation as a brother. Before adopting the technique, I thought of my position, my role in the criminal system, the justice system, totally different. Now I see. Now I'm starting to understand why I'm here, why there is investigative police, why there is this democratic institutions. You understand? It is interesting because I started to understand the role of my institution through interviewing, and not because I had to graduate in law to get this position. So uh, in theory, I should know this already. I should not learn this through investigating crimes and interviewing people, you know?
Yeah.
So it was a whole different perspective of what we are doing here. We, police, what we are doing here. Why are we for, you know? So, and when I adopted the investigative interviewing, it started as a strategy to get more information because I knew that something was not good. Not too many informations, not many details. Some arrests were not holding up in court. So something was not okay,
Mm.
right? So it started as this strategy to make my work as an investigator more efficient. Okay. Then I began to realize that the way I used to do it through closed questions, you know, often led to suggestive or leading answers, meaning I wasn't really obtaining new information from interviews. I was only confirming my initial hypothesis, like I said before. Moreover, when dealing with uncooperative witness or suspect, I could not create, like in your story, I could not create uh, an environment conducive to the flow of information. And unless I resorted to some form of coercion,
Mm. Mm.
even even if I didn't recognize it as such at the time, I didn't know I was using coercion. You know, I couldn't get much from them. Okay, if I didn't resort to coercion, but it is important to point that I didn't know I was doing this. I couldn't see that approach as coercive. I only see this now
Yeah.
when I go back to those cases. So in the beginning, I was being pragmatic, especially because I was still somewhat detected from the theory in
Mm.
the beginning. But as I got more involved, delving deeper and applying investigative interviewing more effectively in practice, and also studying more, of course, it became a new way of policing altogether. I
Mm.
mean, a new way of thinking about the police and
Mm.
its
Mm.
role in a democratic state. I finally, and I was already graduated in law, so it was late, but I finally understood that public security must coexist with individual freedoms. So I learned it in practice, you
Mm.
know. And I came to see investigative interview has more than just a technical change or a personal mindset shift. It
Mm.
also became a tool for transforming the institutional culture of my police organization as a whole.
Exactly.
You know, once I hold the position of a local manager and I can control the pace and the strategies in every criminal investigation, although I don't conduct them directly, but I can manage them in my units. So I can feel this change. I can see this change
Yep.
from not interviewing directly, but overseeing the
Mm.
investigations. I can see this change. So, and also I'm a instructor at the police academy now for the last 5 years. So I have the opportunity also to present this point of view as a manager, as an investigator, to new officers and to the officers who come back to the academy to learn this. I can hear from them, from these older officers, and we can compare our approaches,
Mm.
and mostly I can convince them, and I can see this shift in not only in me or in the officer A or officer B, but in the institution as a whole.
It's so interesting to hear this, Fernando. It's a really interesting way of putting it, and it took me many years to realize the same thing. What are we really doing here? Because it's so much more than just the interviewing part. Like sometimes try to say it that the problems in the suspect interviews were just a symptom of something larger that was not really about interviewing, but you see the symptoms there strongly.
Yes. Yeah.
But you also saw it in other areas. I remember once we were on a homicide case when I was working in the National Homicide Unit. You are assisting local police forces to solve their difficult cases. And there was one witness observation of the guy who most likely was the perpetrator. And they wanted to arrest him, and they wanted me to interview him. And then I said, well, yes, but we have to also, as soon as possible now, do a lineup with that witness so that she could help us to find out whether this is the right man or not.
Okay.
If we are going to arrest him tomorrow, we have to do this today. Because tomorrow we risk that there is a picture of him in the newspaper or on the TV.
Mm-hmm.
And then the lineup will be worth nothing.
Yes.
And then my bosses, they went into a meeting and they came back and said, we heard what you said, Ivar, but we're not going to do it. We're going to arrest him and you're going to do the interview. I said, why? And they said, what if she doesn't pick him out?
Yes.
If she doesn't pick him out, we will not get custody on him, and you will not have the same effect of the suspect interview. If she doesn't recognize him, maybe it isn't him. We didn't have any technical evidence, nothing. So he was just owning the same motorbike as the suspect, and he had been in the area. So I think this reflects so well how we were thinking.
Yeah. It reminds me that these years, because I also teach eyewitness identification at my academy, and I have in my master's on this from the racial perspective here in Brazil. And so I was asked from a new police commissioner, as we call it here, or delegate of police, and in the class with 20 or 30 students. And then he asked me, okay, what if the witness doesn't choose our suspect? Can we just not keep it in the files? I took a breath, and then, okay, we do what we should do. We explain how memory works, why we want to avoid the biases. Okay, and this common sense question of him, it was overcome. He was convinced that he should not do that. So yes, it was an interesting example that you reminded me with your story. In 2025, people think like this,
Still, yeah.
Still, happily,
it's normal.
Yes, it's normal. But in our roles as managers or officers or instructors, I'm glad we can change this mindset with this approach. So it happens, but we can change it.
Sometimes I used to do it every time before. I don't do it so much more. But every time before, when I had a new class of detectives coming to me, I've also been a professor at the Norwegian Police University College for a long time. And I asked them, all of you, can any of you please tell me, what is it with you guys who make you special? Why should you be here in this room for this special training? And what is different with the way you work and think compared to, let's say, your neighbor or your grandma or your mom? Why are you? No, I asked them.
I'm good.
And they start to say, because I am a police. Well, I know, but I'm not go deeper into it. What is it with your way of thinking? What is it that make you capable of being a detective compared to someone who is not trained? And they couldn't answer it, Fernando.
Mhm.
They didn't know. And I think this is so important that when you go into something, it could be any skill. You have to be aware of the difficulties in it that gives you the feeling of being humble.
Mhm.
To understand that the more I read, the more I learn, the more complicated I see that this is. We even see the best Brazilian football players, they can miss a penalty.
Yes.
Even the good old Pelé sometimes missed a penalty. Cristiano Ronaldo misses penalties in very important competitions. It is situations that is technically relatively easy to do, but in the context with that pressure, and you sometimes can't do it. And I think that's comparable to what it sometimes means to interview a suspect. If you start to think about your own goals, that if I score now, we will be world champions.
Mhm.
That is what you said in the beginning. I was more focusing on my own goals.
Yes.
And I was not focusing on the process here. How am I going to do this correctly? How am I going to be interested in the story of the other person and not just thinking about myself? So I think that, and that pressure that I cannot solve this case if I now score it. I think this is comparable in a way.
Yes. Yes.
And I think also for the investigative interviewing, and I wish I remember for myself, it take away the weight on your shoulder that it's your job to come out of this room with a confession. No, it's not.
Mhm.
So I think actually in one way, it also makes your job a bit easier
Yeah.
in the way that you don't have to judge people. Actually, your job is try to not judge people. That you can leave that to someone else
Yes.
who's actually paid to do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think that is something that many police officers don't think about. They think that it's their job to, as quickly as possible, judge and find out you did it. No.
Yeah. Exactly. We grow up watching movies,
Yeah.
and it is in the common culture,
Yeah.
you know. And yes. So yeah, perfect.
Bernardo, you have now been involved in this, very interesting work in Brazil, and also you have been working in other places around the world teaching. Could you share with us some of your experiences in maybe start with Brazil? How is this spreading, or is it spreading, or is it easy to get focus for this kind of development? Or do you meet resistance? What kind of resistance, and why do you think?
Oh, so in any country, I believe there's a need to increase both the efficiency of criminal investigations and respect for human rights. On one hand, we're never, and I can say this from Brazil or from Latin America, but probably everyone could say this in any place in the earth. We are never entirely free from authoritarian tendencies. So we must always stay vigilant. On the other hand, issues in public security, such as organized crime in Latin America, the rise in homicide rates, domestic violence against human here in Brazil, feminicide, all demand a more professionalized police force capable of conducting effective investigations. But if I were to highlight what makes Brazil's contest different, I would focus on how investigative interviewing can strengthen public trust in the police and the need of obtaining information from people who doesn't really trust us. Here in the Brazilian context, uh, two two major elements have contributed to some democratic erosion and institutional discredit here in Brazil and Latin America, especially regarding the police. First, we come from a military dictatorship
Mm.
during which torture became a systematic practice. Because of this legacy, many people still fear entering a police station as a victim or witness and ending up being treated as a suspect or never leaving at all the police station, being arrested. So people still fear this from this legacy. Second, we have faced a severe challenge with organized crime here in the region. It is estimated that around half of all homicides in Latin America are related to organized crime. Investigating these crimes is challenging not only from a technological or interstate cooperation perspective, but also because of the so-called law of silence, typical of mafia-like organizations.
Yep.
So public cooperation is essential for investigating these crimes, these organized crime related crimes. But how can we expect the public to provide information to the police if they don't trust the
Yep.
police? That's why I see investigative interviewing, that is a technique where coercion and psychological manipulation no longer prevail, and where active listening and genuine interest in what the person has to say becomes central. So I see investigative interviewing as one of the keys or one of the key ways to rebuild public trust that that we we really need here in the region.
It's so interesting. And excuse me, Fernando, because I was looking at my phone, but I was trying to find the name of the footballer from Brazil that gave the famous protest. And I would watch this when I was a younger man. Socrates.
Socrates, of
He
course.
he because I don't know how many of our listeners actually know the background of the authoritarian regime of Brazil. I guess to myself, I can say, Fernando, as a European, I mainly think about Brazil two things. It's the samba and the carnival and football. And this is what you are famous for all over the world, for your fantastic culture of mixing Latin, African, and European things into a fantastic culture. And also how this is represented by the most entertaining football in the world. So when he gave this protest, the world understood, okay, we are the best footballers now in the world, but things are not okay in our country.
Yes. 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 On the 7th, so we have this military dictatorship from 1964 to 1985, right? So we are a young democracy. And while you watched Socrates and Zico and other names from on the 60s, 70s, and 80s, here in Brazil, people were being arrested with no judicial order and no rights. And yes, we left dictatorship, but the practices, they don't just disappear from one day to another. We had our constitution in 1988, and it was not a magical book which made the police respect democracy and the liberties and the individual rights. Thank you for bringing Socrates to the conversation. He was amazing.
I still admire the way he was playing and the way he was a leader for the football team, but probably also for many, many more people if from the country of Brazil. That
yes, yes, yes. He was a great person. Yes.
And I think it's interesting that you link this to what investigative interviewing can help us with, that kind of transformation, where maybe policing, where it came from, well, we all knew the laws. The laws are okay, even in Russia today, even in China, where we see systematically breaking what we call fundamental rights of the individual. But technically, they look all right. Technically, there is no problem. So it's about how you do this inside. This is so fascinating that maybe these systems of criminal justice, well, they have been there for justice, but if you are now challenging the power of the state, it will crush you in some way. Because after all, this is also about power. And I think this is one of the big problems with police and investigative powers around in the world, that the power, if I have to, if I want to, I can crush almost anyone.
Yes. Yes. I tell the new officers that probably we could do anyone say anything
Mm.
against anyone. Like, if you are really into it, you police officer, you can have someone saying anything about their mother, incriminated their own mother. And I can give some examples of how doing it. Not that I did, but you can sit in an interview room and convince a person to confess the rape of a child, for example, because you are the state there, right? The all power state. And you can convince them that it is better to confess something they didn't do, because the other alternative is worse, you know? You can play like you are helping the person. So basically, yes, we can do anything, as I said. So we have to make these young officers who in Brazil they already have a gun, this amazing gun, modern gun, about their responsibilities
Mm.
as professionals, as officers, as people. In one hand, when they understand them that they could do anything, maybe they will just see themselves as even more powerful than they thought. But when they understand the responsibility of it, then maybe they were able to make them come back and
Yep.
think about it,
Yep.
and restrain this power. Yes.
It's so fascinating, and we could go on with this kind of discussions, but we will go fast forward because we will land this conversation before our listeners get bored of our reflections. I was just wanted to ask you, Fernando, one last question, because as you know, David Horn, they are world leading in producing recording technology for interviews. And I was just wondering whether you could say something about what technology can be helpful in this development we are talking about, if you have any reflections on it.
So uh, today, me myself, I record all of my interviews, but me, right? So my role as a head of police stations, I don't only handle investigations, but also administrative and legal responsibility. As a result, I personally conduct only the more complex interviews. I'm talking about homicides, feminicides, organized crime related crimes, sexual crimes, armed robbery, white collar crimes, some serious domestic violence. But in simpler cases, some officers under my supervision still rely on written statements, but that's coming to an end here in my state, in Brazil. Within a year, I guess, we expected nearly 100% of interviews to be recorded, even in these simple cases, because it's not only better for the quality of evidence, it's also better for the police officers, their mental health, their work. So recording is essential because only then we can verify how that memory dependent evidence was obtained. You know about it. And we've seen significant improvements in the maintenance of arrests and convictions since allegations of coercion or abuse are no longer raised or even perceived by defense attorneys. So the police officers, they are asking that the interviews be recorded because they feel more safe with this approach. As for technology, we see here in Brazil, it's not expensive these days. In my state, we have software that compresses video files so they can be uploaded to electronic judicial system. You can do this like with a click. Okay, now I did the interview. So now I'm sending to the judge. if it is. Some other states are even recording few interviews using mobile phone directly linked to official software. Not expensive also. Yeah, so we have to use technology to our favor. And I remember now there's a concern. There's some of concern among unit heads about the time consuming transcription progress, because we don't have to write down the statements, but when a head of unit, like this delegate of police, when we finish a case, we have to write down a report about the case. So most of the cases you mention the statements, the interviews. So it is understand to transcribe some of them. But now it's being solved by AI-based transcription tools.
Mm.
We have them free on internet, or if you want to, we want to keep the security of the information. We already have these tools provided by the police. It's not expensive again today. Technologies that are both affordable and reliable. I see the technology as plays an important role on this consolidation of investigative interviewing techniques. Like I said, the only way that you can evaluate and that you can take the most of benefits of investigative interview is by recording the interviews. Otherwise, you will not be able to see how that evidence was collected. We're spreading here so fast in Brazil, but we're still consolidating the technique, of course. It's not already consolidated 100%. And I see these opportunities as good opportunities to show the other institutions of the judicial system and the press and all stakeholders that we are professionalizing here in Brazil. It is about not we understanding only how law works. Like you said, our law is beautiful, but also we have to develop some skills in psychology, in technology, in other fields, that this will make a difference of us from our neighbor or our mother, like you asked your students.
Exactly.
It's not because we have a gun now.
No.
It is because we are studying and learning from psychology.
Yep.
This is what makes you different from your neighbor, not the gun, not the badge. You understand?
Exactly.
So, and technology comes with all of this. If we are understanding how memory works and how we can make people share information with us, how's the best way so we can bring the person to the conversation, to the interview, and make them provide us information, detailed, reliable information. We have to use technology to show this to the world and to the justice system, to the defense attorneys. So I guess it only brings benefits to the police. If we want to be more professional, we also have to show this professionalism. So this improvement, and technology plays an important role on this.
It reminds me about a good old saying from the British police about documentation, where they used to say, if it isn't written down, it doesn't exist. And this is a bit the same. If you can't document it, the way you did it, it doesn't exist. It can be disputed, it can be twisted, it can be unreliable. Fernando Guzzi, thanks a lot for a wonderful conversation. I have learned a lot, and I'm sure our listeners has done the same. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ivar. Looking forward to following this amazing podcast. Congratulations. And I hope to see you soon again.